Hi everyone, my name is Vanessa Valiuco and welcome to Personal Pans, conversations about belief, transformation, and all the weird and wonderful things that we experience. Tonight's guest is Kiki Dombrowski. She is a medium, a certified life coach, a tarot reader. She actually wrote a book called A Curious Future, which covers all sorts of different types of divination. This was such a wonderful, calming, incredible conversation, so thoughtful. We ended up talking about what it's like to be a spiritual being trapped in a three-dimensional meat sack, the importance of pleasure, referenced Lilith several times, and also the devil in tarot. We talked a lot about the devil in the tarot, and I definitely have a different perspective on that card now, even though I've been reading for multiple years. One of the cool things is that in Kiki's book, she talks about how anything can be a system of divination. And I like to look at coincidences, synchronicities as a form of divination as well. Because when I looked at her divination kit, first of all, there was a little Lilith talisman, and as I show in the episode, I made a necklace using, I think, the identical one. And also, in her book, she has a rune, this one right here, and I actually wood burned the same rune on a really difficult day to protect me about 5 years ago. So I kind of knew from that it was going to be a really good conversation, and it ended up just being this just a wonderful time. So I'm going to stop rambling. Hopefully you will enjoy this conversation as much as I did. I'm just obsessed with your mug, by the way. Like,
oh, thank you. Yeah. It says "Stay golden."
Good, so good.
Here, and I'll show
yes.
you this too. I know you're recording, but I got this.
Yes.
It's this little button that you push. And it's just it's just like ridiculous sound bites from the Golden Girls. So anytime I'm having because I work from home, and anytime I'm stressed, I just hit the button and I listen to somebody say something funny.
I love it because that was such a good show, and I have so many memories of watching it as a kid.
Yeah. Oh, same. I know it's my number one favorite show.
Oh, and I love that. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Have you used a friend of mine got me a copy of the Golden Girls Tarot, and I still haven't used it yet because I keep thinking I'm like, I'm gonna do an unboxing video or something. And it's like, I do a million things. Like, why do I think I'm gonna have time for that? On top of everything else, you know?
Yeah. It's incredible. The Golden Girls tarot deck is adorable. It's so much fun. It's fun to use. It really brings a sweet and wholesome twist to a tarot reading. Like, I don't know, especially if you're a Golden Girls fan, or even if you just kind of like that kind of 80s Miami pastel neon kind of vibe. It's just such a sweet little deck.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. Yes. Well, and that's been my experience with, like, different decks absolutely have different energies. Like, whether or not it's like the subject matter or the intention of the creator, you know, it's just important to kind of get a read on a specific deck, because then, you know, like, okay, I'm going to do a reading for this very soft friend of mine, so I'm going to pull the soft deck as opposed to like the very, very sassy deck, which I only save for people that I know can handle that.
Yeah. And I find the main deck I use is the Smith-Waite Centennial. So that is a version of what people normally call the Rider-Waite or the Rider-Waite Smith deck. And my deck, I feel, has a real good attitude. So if you ask the same question a couple times, it's just not gonna give you what you want. And I've also found too that the deck is very, very clear in its responses when I should be doing something other than reading tarot, or when I need tough love, or when I need, something soothing. I really, yeah, I like that. I like that idea of
Yeah.
talking about the different energies and personalities of decks. We really bond with them because they're a tool that we, you know,
Yeah.
connect with and use. And yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that I love that you bring that up too, because I know I've mentioned this before, but like my favorite readings are when somebody asks a question, or even when I ask a question and the tarot is like, cool, you got to stop focusing on this, and then answers something else. And it's so clear what the other thing it's talking about. It's like, all
Yeah.
right, I get it. I will stop putting energy into this, you know?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that people who are comfortable with getting readings and maybe a little bit more familiar with the process of getting a reading are really cool with going with the flow and knowing, okay, I know tarot might take me down another path. But, I've
Yeah.
also had, clients too, where they come in to find out about the next love of their life. And all they get are these cards that are like, have you polished your resume? How's your LinkedIn look? Have you, how much effort are you putting into your job? Is your house clean? And I like that. I'm like, oh, ooh, like I get excited when I see that. As a reader,
Totally.
I see that as an opportunity to go, hey, maybe the love of your life is not in this reading, but these other cards are showing you that maybe this is the path that you need to take in order to get to that. Sometimes people who aren't familiar with, getting a reading may look at that and go like, well, this sucks. Like, this is not what I came in for.
Of course. Yes.
But it's like, no, it is what you came in for. This is exactly what you came in for.
Exactly. I know. I think that's what, and again, it took me years to kind of be aware of this, but it's like, okay, whatever you think is either like a no or a, or just ignoring your question, it's actually telling you, like you said, all the steps you need to take to get to that position where you want to be in, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I had this friend, I was doing readings for her. She was in this horrible relationship with this terrible dude, and she kept trying to ask how she could make it work. And the deck was like trying to be, I watched it happen. The deck like was trying to be kind, and then eventually it was like, all right, you got to stop, you got to focus. It was just wands all over the place. It was like, you got to focus on your work. Like you have to focus on you and your work. There are no cups here. Like,
right. I love how it starts with like the Hermit, the Page of Cups. And you're just like, I think this is really soulful time for you to get to talk with your inner child. And they're like, no, I want my boyfriend. And then it just ends up being something like, you get the Seven of Swords, the Ten of Swords. Like,
exactly.
we tried.
We tried. Exactly. I know. You didn't listen to the gentle reminders. So now we're just bringing them out.
Yeah.
The heavier hitters.
And sometimes I think that happens in real life too, right? That doesn't happen just in tarot readings. That's something we see in our lives as well, especially with health. Like we might have, a scratchy throat, and in our heads, our little inner voice might say, well, you should maybe take, vitamin C. And get some sleep. But instead you decide to go out to a smoky bar and have a few drinks, and then you get sick the next day. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Again, I grew up a pretty like sick kid, so and a lot of like ear, nose, and throat stuff. And I'm not always like 100% about like Louise Hay, and that I think too much of it can get in this idea of like your brain is making you ill. But I like it as a perspective in terms of like, okay, I'm always getting hit with ear, nose, and throat stuff. Do I have blocked anger? Yeah, probably, like looking at in terms of trauma, like, okay, like not that it's caused the illness, but it's maybe a thing to like reflect on, like, oh yeah, maybe I should do some work in this aspect.
Right.
And like, again, self-care, slowing down, taking some supplements rather than like pushing. Your body will tell you, like, yeah.
Yeah. And it's, I think we all have anger. I think we all do. And that's kind of the
Especially
thing.
now.
I'm just gonna, this is kind of personal and it has nothing to do with anything magical, but I'm sure we'll circle back somehow.
Of course.
The pandemic made me so socially anxious. I've always been kind of quirky and a little shy, but I find now that social anxiety comes out in frustration and anger for me. Like I hate the grocery store. For some reason, I get so angry when I go to the grocery store, and I just constantly felt ashamed by that. I thought, why am I such a cranky, mean person who can't stand going to the grocery store, who can't stand when people are pushing their carts around me.
Yeah.
And then like I finally realized, I was like, oh my God, like my anxiety is shifting into like sort of anger or frustration, and maybe that's something I need to look at. So I think that, and I guess I share that because, you know, even people who are in the woo-woo witchy world, we still have, you know, the entire spectrum of emotions. And I love the idea of like, you know, maybe I'm having physical ramifications from you know, mental or emotional blockages. But yeah, that's not the full solution either, because I think everybody has anger, and you're not blocking yourself from, you know, receiving money just because you had a bad day. Like I can't, I get really angry. See, here it is.
Yeah, I love this.
I get a little bit frustrated when people are like, oh, well, you know, maybe you have a money problem because you just think you have a money problem, or because you know, maybe you're sad just because you keep announcing to the universe that you're sad, or maybe it's a chemical imbalance, or you're working through some heavy trauma and having some deep talks with your inner child, and it's bringing up a lot of stuff.
Oh my God, Kiki, I'm gonna have to add some sort of like applause, like crowd roar in the podcast, because yes, exactly. I again, I consider myself fairly woo, but I'm also rooted in, again, my background is social science research. Like I care about what's the data, what's the science, you know, I understand the limitations of science, the limits of objective, you know, objectivity. And also we are, I think, spiritual creatures in a meat sack. And sometimes the meat sack misfires. And like, that's not just all up here.
I love it. I said something to that effect to my boyfriend the other weekend. I said something to the effect of like, well, you know, I feel like a very spiritual starseed, but this meat sack is a hot mess sometimes. I said something like that to that extent. So yeah, I understand. You know, like when I was young, one of the first spiritual books I read was a woman's book, and she wrote about her past lives. And I don't know if it's something, I think it was something that was maybe a smaller press publishing. It was my friend's mother who wrote it. It was called A Spirit Wrapped in Flesh. And to me, that was the most poetic way of saying, I have this really profound magical essence, and it is in this really funny
Yes.
third dimension, and I'm doing the very best I can. Thank you very much.
Exactly. Yes. That, I think about this a lot, because it's like, okay, I think you can do a lot with magical work. I think you can do a lot with divination, ritual. I think that's so important. And also, if you don't have a good therapist, or you aren't doing like proper trauma work, right? Because like you said, this idea that, well, maybe you're sad is because you keep announcing that you're sad. It ignores and it minimizes all of the social conditions that contribute to mental illness. And I think that's also really dangerous, right? Like you have to look at all the different components in society, all the things that are unchangeable in society, or at least unchangeable on an individual level, and like understand how that contributes to people's well-being or lack thereof.
Right. So we are in late stage capitalism, post-pandemic, potential pre-war, freaking, and instead we're just talking about Will Smith, you know, having a hissy fit. You know, it's like, oh my God, no wonder we're frustrated and tired, and burnt out, and getting hit with these more complex emotions. It's not just peace and love. But I wonder too, you know, maybe circling back to woo, did we choose to be here at this time, to have this experience, to actually say, you know what, like maybe on the other side we were sitting in just our essence. We weren't, we were just spirits. We weren't spirits wrapped in flesh.
However spirits sit, yes.
And we said, you know what, I just want to take like the most advanced level class at Oxford University. I know you should go to Planet Earth at 20, you know, let's just get you in at like 2012. and let's just go for it. Have a go. Good luck. Report
Exactly.
back when you're done.
Have fun.
We have all collectively been through a psychological roller coaster. We've had to learn how to, sustain in a more secluded way. We're constantly bombarded with news around the world, and that news is also filtered through algorithms based on what we say out loud around our Siri and Alexa. It's like really a weird time.
Yes, exactly. And again, it's like, if you look at like at least our awareness of human history, right, and even like prehistory and biology, it's kind of like, we're not wired to deal with any of this, right? Like, we are not. Like, we've kind of gotten this crash course in like training, but synaptically, like from an adrenal standpoint, no, we are not wired for this constant stress, you know? Like, yeah.
I mean, like, we're in fight or flight because we're 5 minutes late to work.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly. Yes, I know. Well, and talking about brain chemistry, like I've talked about this on the podcast a couple times before, like I, a history of panic attacks. And then I got on Lexapro finally, like a year and a half ago. Right. And it just stopped. Like I was on the smallest dose because I'm like, I don't know. I'm like a Polish girl who doesn't trust like medication and things like that, and I was like, I don't know. 10 milligrams, that's fine. And like, but I would get sad, but I wouldn't get super depressed, or I would get like upset about something, but it never turned over into a panic attack. And it was just like, oh, is this just how people function? Where it's like adrenal up and then down because it's like the moment passes, right? Wow. But also we have, like you said, we have so many mechanisms in our society now that are like, be terrified of this, be terrified of this, be terrified of this, because there are consequences. Sometimes you're 5 minutes late to work and you get fired. And then you have to figure out, again, how to operate in late stage capitalism and all of that. Like,
right. Yeah.
There's a lot going on. So yeah, having some grace, like, of course you're going to get mad when you go to the grocery store. Like, there's a lot going on.
It's so expensive. It's never like, I don't know. I moved. So I've lived in the South for a really long time at this point. I mean, like, when did I move? I mean, 15 years at this point, but I came from Connecticut.
Yes.
And it's funny, I moved to Nashville direct from England because I spent a year in England studying, and that was like the biggest culture shock. I just remember being in Nottingham, and then, like 3 weeks later, I'm in Nashville in a dive bar, with a Velvet Elvis on the wall, which is great, and fried bologna sandwiches and PBRs, so it's just like this total flip. But I always, there's something about the South that, I still feel like a displaced Yankee because I came from Connecticut. I mean, one of the things I always jokingly say about here is that it's like, you can never go to one grocery store. It's always like, I have to like go to like 3 grocery stores to complete my list. So there's Kroger, and then I go to Publix, then I go to Whole Foods, and I never had that issue, I guess, in Connecticut. But then again, I was also younger when I lived there.
That's true. Different needs.
But yeah, I love it here. And I just, as you see from my background, I recently moved into an apartment. I live on an island just east of Savannah. So,
oh my God, amazing.
It's like, I really feel like a bona fide swamp witch because like, I really am surrounded by marshes. And if I go in one direction, I'm at the ocean. And if I go in the other direction, I'm in this beautiful historic downtown Savannah.
God,
really, it's a beautiful adjustment to just,
of course,
enjoy this. But
I love that. How have you noticed just the energetic, because again, your book, which I do have, talking about being a medium, because you are so close to all these different spaces, like, are you experience kind of this like mingling energy, or is it just very distinct as you kind of travel in between?
Well, this is an in-between place. Like, being on an island itself feels very in between and being on a marsh that's sometimes, there's more
Yeah.
water and sometimes there's not so much water.
Yeah.
Depending on what the tides are doing. And driving out to Tybee Island, which is the next island out, and where the beaches are, the Savannah beach. It's a very mystical experience. I had been coming to these islands in Savannah for years because one of my best friends, who now actually lives like half a mile up the road from me, she's been here for like 10 years. And so even while I lived in Nashville, I was driving to and from just to visit, and I fell in love with the ocean energy. And I always said, when I was leaving Nashville to come visit here, I'd say, well, I have to go, Mother Ocean is calling.
Yeah.
And so that's how I would put it. And so the spirit of place here is very, very healing. And I think that Savannah in particular is starting to see a lot of people come here. Me, I don't know if it's an up and coming, if I'm part of that up and coming, but a lot of people that are coming here are more spiritually minded. Maybe they connect with all the oak trees or the oak tree energy, or maybe it's Mother Ocean that calls them. Or the liminal energy of being in the marshes and in the tides. Savannah is said to be super, super haunted. The history of Savannah is a little bit intense, heavy, and dark. So I don't really go to downtown Savannah, with my mediumship feelers out there going, I think I really want to connect with this, because to me, it's just, it's not where I'm at mentally.
Of course.
Yes. But I'm sure that if there's tons of ghost tours. I always say that it's a good place for ghost pirates. And now we actually have a hockey team called the Ghost Pirates.
What? I'm gonna have to start following hockey, because that's amazing.
Yeah, it's really cute. It's really cute. I don't think it's NHL. I think it's whatever, the next grade down. Not that that matters. We still have a good time.
Of course.
But I think that there's a diverse range of energies here. And I think that Savannah is starting to see a lot of people move in, and a lot of people who are into Reiki and crystal healing. And one of my best friends who lives up the road, she's opening up a jewelry store that's based on a lot of crystals.
Amazing.
And she does crystal grids. And there's lots of yoga people here. There's magical people. So I wonder if there's something. I always say it's Atlantean. I'm like, oh, we're all returning to Atlantis.
Love it. Yes.
With Jimmy Buffett playing here. Who knew? Who knew Jimmy Buffett was headlining Atlantis? But here we are.
That's the thing about Atlantis, full of surprises.
I know, right? It's a real treat.
Amazing. Yeah, well, that you talking about the ocean, because reading about your experience at the beach, and also with shells, right? And that idea of connecting with things that are really important to you. So I think it's cool that you're that close again and have this easy access to the beach.
Yeah, it's about a 15-minute drive from where I am, which is so cool.
Yes.
And to me, it's really cool too, because I lived in Nashville and it was an 8-hour plus drive to get to the coast. And now I'm like, I think I'll go swimming tonight.
Oh, so good.
So one thing, and I find it super healing. I really do, and that kind of goes back to that idea of the Mother Ocean energy. I have a very stressful job, and it is really nice at the end of the day when it gets really warm in the water. It gets over 80 degrees, which to me is just heavenly.
Yeah.
In the summer when the light's up late, after work, I'll go down to the ocean and just go swimming, and it feels very purifying. And, I guess that's a classic, witch tradition to believe that, that salt is so purifying, and it really is a purifying element, and to incorporate that into your life, whether it's a salt bath or, salt circles, or putting salt in the corner of your room, or, swimming in the ocean. This is an opportunity to, sort of, maybe I like to think of it as it's like taking a dry eraser, like to your aura and just kind of blending it out and
Yes.
putting a muck.
I love that.
You picked up from the drama of the day.
Of course, exactly. Well, and that too, it's like, okay, late stage capitalism, stressful jobs, just stressful circumstances. So being able to just like cleanse yourself and have such easy access to this is again incredible.
Well, come visit whenever you want. Eventually this room will be set up and
Oh my God, amazing.
the little seat behind me actually turns into a guest bed. So
What? You've got it all set up over there. That sounds incredible.
I figure that if people need a little break, they could come visit. So
I like that. Yes. Yeah. Well, and especially like who doesn't need a break right now, right? Like it's again lots of energy. But I love this idea of like salt as a crystal, because also like what you write about crystals and the importance of that and connecting with that. Again, like one thing that I just loved about your book, well, two things, I guess. One, the idea of like you really need to practice like any divination. You're not necessarily born a witch, right? It's okay. And it's okay if you're not born a witch. Like you can learn things and tap into your intuition.
Right.
But then also like figuring out what really resonates with you, right? So that idea of like the shells, you connect with that because the beach means something to you. Like that's so important to you, right? Other people might not be into the water, right? And that's cool too. Like find your thing, because there's going to be something out there that really resonates with you.
Might be stones and pine cones, and go for it.
Exactly.
If you're a forest witch, you might be collecting acorns and pine cones and little empty snail shells, and that could become a divination kit of some kind for you, or it could be your form of magic.
Yes. Yeah. And that's really cool. It just like opens it up so you can do anything. That's another thing I really liked. I guess I liked more than just two things about you.
Thank you.
But you can use anything. Like what you can use, again, that's like the chaos magician in me. That's like, no, just whatever works. It's literally anything. Like grab it. If it calls to you, grab it. You can use that later.
Yeah. And to your point, I think that was a really important message of the book, was that there's more divination than just tarot, astrology, and palm reading. And tarot, astrology, and palm reading are awesome. Like, don't get me wrong, like I love them all. But some people don't connect to those things. Some people just go, I don't really like tarot, and that's okay. Do you want to try another type of cartomancy? Why don't you try playing cards, or Oracle, or Lenormand, or if you are kind of an ocean person, maybe seashells are the path for you, or dice, or pendulum. There's the idea is that there's unlimited opportunities in the world of magic and divination, and through practice and exploration and maybe even personal reflection, you are going to find the things that you connect with and become a spiritual support tool.
Yes. Oh, I love that term, spiritual support tool, right? Like that's such a good, well, and that too, because again, we were talking earlier about this idea of being like spirit wrapped in flesh, right? The meat sack. The spirit might know, the meat sack needs to test, right? And that's okay.
The meat sack's like, I'm just going to cover my face with crystals until it feels better.
Where's the fluorite?
I know. But it's so funny too. Both of us just like automatically pressed those crystals. Oh, and it's funny too. It was fluorite that I had. And I pressed it right to my third eye. So I love that. That's still that like very, very solid third dimensional, I don't know, little tool connecting to the third eye.
Yes, exactly. Right.
Also good to have fluorite by your computer, apparently.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Well, good.
It's
this on accident.
Yeah. I don't remember where I heard that. So somebody's going to fact check and email me and be like,
yeah, you're spreading information.
Yeah. It's a little folklore. How about that?
There you go. Perfect. Exactly. Well, and again, too, I mean, I think I identify as a chaos magician. I'm pretty flexible, and sometimes feel like I'm not, I think I sometimes feel it's inconsistent, but I think I'm just very like, well, I don't feel like this today, but maybe this is true, you know? But for me, it's kind of like, all right, do you believe that having fluoride by your computer is important? Then great, do that, right? Like
Yeah.
that, at the very least, you will feel better. And again, that will help keep oxidative stress at bay. And then again, you're taking care of your meat sack. So yeah.
Well, and I think kind of remembering, so fluoride is meant to help with concentration. So
oh, great.
I have
Yes.
no attention span anymore. None. And I blame it on TikTok. And now I love TikTok and I really just watch birds and cats on my TikTok, but and cooking videos.
Yes.
But I find that that's another thing about kind of living post-pandemic. A lot of us really became dependent on our devices as means to communicate with the world, but it also became a way for us to self-soothe. And and that's not a place of judgment. Like, I'm not like,
oh yeah.
like I get really annoyed when people are like, you need to put down your device. I'm like, look at this world. Like, we're doing our very best.
Oh, on it. Okay, thank you. Again, another little applause sting. I'm just making a note for myself.
Like,
yes.
yeah, we should put our phones down every now and then. But, even before there were phones, people were looking at the TV, people were reading magazines, people were looking at books, people were taking opium, people were staring at fires. Like, we're always trying to find something to keep our attention. But I think that there's something very, with the swiping through the screens and the scrolling, it's killed my attention span.
Yeah.
So I do my very best, but I know that fluorite is meant to be one of those crystals that helps you maintain focus.
That's great. Yes.
It's supposed to be creative too and attract fairies. So if you're
excellent.
a gay person, it's also nice to have a little piece hanging around.
Perfect. Well, that's what I love too. So there were a couple things. Again, this idea of like finding divination anywhere, because there were a couple things that you wrote about that I was like, this is going to be a good interview. Because one in your kit was a little Lilith amulet, and I like have this chainmail necklace that I had made a couple of years ago that I like dug out.
Oh my God, I think that's the same exact one I have.
I saw the drawing
in the picture. I'm like looking for my kit, but obviously it's still packed away.
Of course.
In the stack off the camera. But yes, that little Lilith is so cool. What energy.
Thank you. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. That when I found that, I was like, I'm making it into a necklace that is just gonna like hang right here. That's for me, Yeah.
Well, and the wonderful thing about that Lilith energy too is that does remind us that there are some delights and decadences that can be enjoyed in the third dimensional flesh meat sack. Like, we can find things that we can enjoy and we could savor and having those emotions. And that's, maybe for some people having those lusts or those passions can be there's a sense of shame or guilt or embarrassment surrounding those. And I love Lilith because she says there's no shame here. If that's what makes you feel good.
Yes. Enjoy yourself. Yes.
Be mindful and careful and safe and, transparent and enjoy yourself.
Exactly. Well, and that too, I'm immediately, of course, thinking of the devil in the tarot, which is normally about like, again, indulging too much, kind of being imprisoned by your body. But I love this idea that like, again, when I talked to Cassandra Snow, it was this idea that like, okay, if you look at like the devil through a queer lens, right, then it's about shame. Like, what are you ashamed of? Are you ashamed of your body? Are you ashamed of your wants? Like, have you internalized a lot of shame that shouldn't be yours, right? Like, embrace the meat sack. Like, this is part of our lived experience.
Yeah.
So figure out how to work with it and enjoy yourself while you're also like the spiritual creature. Again, like, I love that you said like this 3-dimensional body, because I rage about that all the time. I'm like, this makes no sense. We're stuck in 3-dimensional space with a linear time dimension. I hate it.
When did I pick to be a sim? Like, How did I do this?
You. Yes, exactly. These needs aren't getting met. I'm gonna have to go make a salad.
Yeah, I know. Oh God. And it's so yeah, golly. Makes me think about how yesterday I went to go do errands, and halfway through I was like, oh, I don't feel good. And I realized I hadn't eaten since breakfast. I was like, oh yeah, human body. Okay.
Exactly.
A little, maybe an energy bar will help. It's just I don't know. It's very interesting. But going back to that idea of the devil, I got a reading ages ago from somebody, and the devil card came up in the reading. And I really liked her interpretation of the card. She talked about the traditional things where, like, where do you feel you're being weighed down by obligations, or, where do you need to be liberated? All that kind of things associated with the devil. Are you overindulging? She also added one thing that I thought was really fun. She said, sometimes the devil reminds us we can be a little bit more playful.
Oh my God.
Are we being too serious? Are we being too restrictive with ourselves? Are we being so pure and so puritanical that we're missing out on, like, one scoop of ice cream is not going to kill you. If it brings you a little pleasure and joy, bon appetit.
Right.
Exactly. Or I don't know. Yes. We all know some of the things that are associated with it. Well, I wouldn't say that. We don't all know, but sometimes the devil is about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. That's what I like to say. Yeah. So, if we're all adults and I think a little rock and roll is fun,
And also because of this idea of like the devil kind of, taking a bunch of older trickster archetypes, right? That idea of play, that to me is very, again, liberating and incredibly important, because like play philosophically and practically is a very important part of my life. And I think is this kind of, again, rebellion to what we were talking about in terms of late stage capitalism, the obligations of stressful jobs. It affirms the self in defiance of, to me, the expectations of society. And I think that is very powerful and very important, right? Yeah. So again, if you're looking at the devil in terms of the adversary, like the adversary to what right now, right? Like, again, maybe it's capitalism. Maybe go and play, right? Like maybe go to a concert and have that ice cream.
I know. It makes me think a little bit about the musical choices I'm making recently. I used to consider myself a very like a music snob. Like I had very specific tastes in music, and I loved, like, I say, like, well, anything on 4AD records is my favorite. So it's like Dead Can Dance and the Cocteau Twins are my total favorites. And I love like shoegaze music. Recently, I'm just listening to pop music. Like I'm all about Doja Cat and Britney Spears. Amazing. And in some ways I feel like that is defiant against the heaviness and the seriousness of our times. That's somewhere inside of me. I need to be more playful with my musical choices. And right now I need something lighthearted. And so I'm just leaning into it. Pop music is fantastic.
I love that. And again, it's like, where can you find joy in a world that is so heavy and that is so dark, right? Like, because we are, again, this book I've mentioned a couple times on the podcast, Homo Ludens by Johann Huizinga, and his entire the entire book, the thesis is that human society is built off of play. The human experience is built off of play. Even goes so far as to talk about the animal kingdom, like that there is something kind of inherent to life. Play is inherent to life, right? So, and so much of what we do in our world is about telling us that is childish and that we need to grow up and get out of that mindset. It's like, no, this is part of who we are. Yeah. And there's nothing immature about it. Like we all play all the time. Like it's powerful.
And it makes me think of a possible other lesson that would come with the devil too is, are things too complex? Are you being too snobby? Well, I think one of the things that I've reverted to is trying to have more wholesomeness in my life, just really loving, wholesome things like the Golden Girls.
Yes.
I love the Crocodile Hunter, and I love animal shows, or pop music. Like, what happens when we just, find joy and pleasure in things that are just genuine and authentic and wholesome, as opposed to, we don't need to be serious and quote Nietzsche all the time. And sorry, we've all had that ex, haven't we?
Or we all were that person in high school. I'm proud of it.
Or we don't all have to, you don't have to complain and bitch and moan and have, I don't know, like, not everything has to be a moment for sarcasm. Not everything has to be a moment where you have to one up somebody else. Like, maybe there's just pleasure in, that ice cream scoop, or, something wholesome. I don't know. It might be a lesson with the devil, especially like if it was combined with like the Fool. Like, if you got the Fool card and the devil card together, I'd be like, wholesomeness, playfulness, explore the things that bring you joy. Yes, go on an adventure.
Yeah, go on an adventure. Like, go to the beach, go to the woods, do something that, like, again, tapping into that childlike enthusiasm for something, because that is so important. Like it's funny. All right, I'm gonna be edgelord Nietzsche quoter for a second. Second. Like, even Nietzsche was like, become light. Like, this idea of people carry all this heaviness. Like, what ultimately is there, right? Like all these people think that there's this profundity in being dark and being nihilistic and seeing just only the evil in the world, and thinking that there's some kind of grand philosopher because of that. It's like, no, if you can find that joy, if you can find that light in the face of annihilation, that's real power. Like, that's real freedom.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
You're right. That is real freedom. That is, again, the liberation of the devil card.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Wow. Deep thoughts. I love conversations where you just like, and that's one of the beautiful things about tarot and about divination in particular. It could truly take you down a rabbit hole of exploring, the third dimension, your place in it, but also just the whys and the hows of it, or the maybe ifs. There's a lot of theorizing and thoughtful and inspiring ideas and revelations that could come out of using divination. It just, our conversation is a wonderful example. Like, we just like really dissected the devil card in some really incredible ways, into encouraging listeners to find something playful.
Yes, exactly. And again, I know, I think you said in your book you got your first tarot deck when you were 13. Am I remembering that right? Yeah. I got my first when I was 15. Again, I never thought about the devil in this way before until we had this conversation, right? So that like, the idea of even your experience with certain divinatory tools, like, that's going to evolve over time, and that's okay. Like, communicating with other people, like, that's also a good way to get a new understanding or a different understanding of what these particular tools are. Like, then you can only use them better at that point. Like, challenge what you think your perception of something is. To me, the questions are always more interesting than walking into something and saying, like, I know the answer, I know exactly what this is, and I'm just going to find data to prove my point. But first of all, that's not science. And second of all, it's kind of boring. Like, don't you want to learn something?
Oh, bland. Yeah.
Right? Like, I kind of love it when somebody's like, no, actually, you're wrong. Let me show you this other stuff. It's like, oh, great. I'm going to update my information now. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, and I feel that's something I'm 40. So I've been reading witchy books since the 90s. And, there's been a lot of reevaluation of the content of some of my favorite books growing up. But I like that. Like, it makes me question. I still honor and celebrate everything that, you know, I had on my bookshelf when I was 13, 14, 15 years old,
Yes.
but I could look at it now with fresh eyes as a result of other people's newfound wisdom, their additional resources, their fact checking. You know,
Yes.
I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. Yes. And I think too, there are two things. The first thing I wanted to talk about was, you know, you talking about this idea of like, again, the idea of play and having that conversation of like people trying to one up each other. Like there's really power in just listening and being receptive. I think people ignore that. Like, and if not necessarily power, just like presence, right? Like, what does this person have to say? What cool thing is coming out of their mouth right now that might change everything that I think about something? That's really why I started the podcast. I met all these like incredible people at Panparacon. I'm like, I don't know anything, so I'm going to talk to more people who know really cool things.
Well, I'm sure you were just like chock full of awesome information too.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
And it's great. Again, I've never been a huge fan of school. I love learning. And every time I talk to somebody, it's like again, this conversation about the devil card, I'm like, oh, this is going to change how I interact with the world, you know, and interact with the tarot. Like, this is important.
Yeah. Now people might look at the devil card, and instead of looking at it with heaviness, there's an opportunity to pull something out of it that may give you a little glimmer of hope.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just looking at it. Yeah.
And you know, there's no card that's like 100% happy and good and 100% miserable and negative, but there are certainly cards that are a little bit more intense and challenging to see when they come up in a reading, and the devil tends to be one of those.
Yes.
And there are multiple cards like that, like yucky cards, like the Three of Swords and the Ten of Swords and the Tower. You look at those images and you're just like, oh no. What is, and so one of the things, and maybe this is because maybe this is in defiance of that heaviness, or, you know, that sort of like, you know, there's truth and darkness. Maybe there's truth and light. And maybe we could even look at the Three of Swords and the Tower and the devil and go, you know what, there's something good in here and I'm going to figure it out.
Yes.
You know?
Well, and that too, it's like, there is that nothing is black and white, right? Or very few things in life are black and white. And especially with the tarot, and especially because it's like developing a relationship with divination, it's there's going to be mixes of things within the cards, within the shells, within the bones, like whatever it is, there's a story there. And so I like this idea of kind of like evaluating and accepting, like, okay, there might be something good here, and it's not from like a rose-colored glasses, like, because I think you've been in that situation too, where you're reading for someone you care about and it's really bad and you're just like, all right.
Yeah. And it's not sort of like this, like, love and light washing kind of thing either. You know, love and light is very important. And it's almost like just accepting that, you know, maybe for me personally, I'll say this, one of the methods, because I've been through a huge difficult transitions. And, you know, I've mentioned even publicly that, you know, I'm dealing with exhaustion and burnout and sort of the mental health that comes along with that. And one of the ways that I combat that is just pleasure. And that could, and I don't mean that necessarily in just like a, you know, silly, you know, I'm going out and dancing, or a sexy way, or a decadent way. I just mean it as in like, I'm just going to do what's pleasing right now, because it's really, that's the easiest thing I could do. And maybe that means like taking a shower. You know?
Yes.
Maybe that means watching 4 episodes of The Gilded Age in a row, or Bridgerton, which I finished in like 3 nights.
Amazing.
You know, and maybe it means not getting wrapped up in challenging or complex situations. And maybe it means not being as social, you know, but whatever is pleasing is really important.
I love this for many reasons. because I think you bring up this important point that I think that we're all so alienated from what real pleasure is that usually even saying the word pleasure and the immediate neural connection is hedonism, right? And just doing something outlandish or something decadent, right?
Yeah, like going out on a bender and what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas kind of thing.
Literally exactly that. Yes, exactly. And again, one of my favorite books is Eros and Civilization. And he talks about this idea specifically in the context of capitalism of being alienated from your body, right? And be what you want and what you think you want, right? That we aren't connected to that. And so his whole thing is getting back to Eros and separating or kind of elevating the idea of sensuality and decoupling it from sexuality, right? Sensuality is just finding pleasure in your body. Sometimes it's eating that really nice chocolate, right? Or taking a shower or just like curling up in bed with a good book and some tea, right? Just being in your body.
Now I want to do that for the rest of the day. Thank you.
I know, even talking about that, I'm like, I'm gonna do that after this call. That delight, right? And again, the celebration of the self, and not in a way that is like destructive or indulgent, right? Like there's such power in just affirming who you are and what you want. Because again, he argues, which I also believe, that like when you see people doing destructive things or terrible things, it's because they're alienated from that eros, right? That like sense of life and that sense of love. That's the only way you could, if you were decoupled from your own sense of pleasure and joy. Because I remember when I first started my chainmail business, and I'm having the same thing happen now as I'm like working on this podcast and doing more paranormal things. Like when I'm building something, I am at my happiest. And all I want is for everyone else to be that happy. And so I'm like giving advice, sometimes unsolicited, but just like, hey, what do you need? How can I help? Because that's all I want, right? Because I'm embodied, I'm in that like dopamine factory that I need, right? So of course, if people don't know what they want, B, are alienated from their bodies. I should have had more if I was going to start a list, but all of that, right? It's like, of course they're going to be, they're not even good. Like, again, like you said, going on a bender, it's like, is that really what you want? Really? If it is, cool. But is it? Interrogate that, right?
Well, and that's another devil question. That's another devil card question. Why do we glamorize the overuse of drugs and alcohol and sex, but then we also shame it?
Yes.
You know, it's like, I had a crappy week. I'm just going to drink a lot tonight. And it's concerning, and it could be part of a capitalist issue. And it could also be that disconnect to what you were saying. Like, I don't know what my body needs. And so this was the solution that was handed to me in advertisements and by my peers.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Because again, if you have spent, it's different. Again, you kind of tapped into witchier things early. I did too. I've always kind of considered myself an outsider. When Madeline Kelly did my astrology chart, they said that I was born at the most liminal time possible. And liminal spaces are really where I feel most comfortable. So I'll track. Yeah. And I think because of that, I've been more in tune over the years with what I really need in the moment, what I really want in the moment. But everything in society is always telling us that what we want and who we are not real or evil, but here's this product you can buy that will make everything better, right?
Yeah,
if you don't feel better, it's because you need to do more of it. It's like,
or you need to buy more.
That's it, exactly. Yes. Yeah. So
very interesting. I just it's so amazing, all this stuff that could just come out from talking about one or two cards.
I know.
It's incredible, and it gives you a lot to think about. But I really do, I encourage people when they look at that devil card now to go, and that goes along with the idea of illusions. There are so many illusions in late stage capitalism.
Yes.
But, you know, after the devil comes the Tower card, and then comes the Age of Aquarius with the Star card.
Yes.
So maybe if we're kind of in a space where we feel like we're swinging between the devil and the Tower, because there's a lot going on, and it has felt that way. I like to say, well, maybe it means we really truly are moving into a space and an age where we find our pleasure.
Yes.
And that pleasure can be something more genuine and authentic to what we truly desire. It could be bird watching, for all I care. My dad has flying squirrels at his house in Connecticut, and I was obsessed. Like, I took videos and like text messaged them to people. I was like, look at these flying squirrels. But I found my joy. My joy is just observing animals. You know, like, I really enjoy watching animals.
Same. I've been in this apartment for like 10 years. There have been these house finches that show up, and they usually hit like one of the apartments like around me. And I finally decided, I'm like, I'm going to put out a bird feeder. And it took them a couple weeks, and then they realized like, oh, this place has all the sunflower seeds and nobody knows about it. So now it's just like constant stream of house finches outside my window. Yeah. And it's the same kind of thing. They bring me so much joy.
Yeah.
So much joy. Yes.
Yeah. Little bird, maybe yeah. And I think that's in the book too, isn't there? I'm like, what did
I know.
Somewhere here. Let's look. I know that there is ornithomancy.
Yes.
There's bird watching. Like, you could actually, I mean, what happens when we observe birds or animals that come into our lives? Like, what happens when you see flying squirrels randomly? You know, how do you interpret that? Is that a spiritual lesson somewhere?
Yes.
One that may be saying, you know, be more playful.
Oh, that's such a good, yes. I love that. I mean, that again, well, and I like this too, because I very intentionally set something out so I could invite that play into my life, right? So that's, again, the joy I have is like when a cat is purring, you know, that kind of like relaxing of the nervous system that hopes like, oh, the birdies, you know. So we, and again, I probably need that too, because late stage capitalism, very stressful, and to reconnect with nature in a little way. Oh, really important. Yeah.
Wow, really great point, and really especially valuable for people who identify as, you know, either a witch or a magician or pagan. You know, I think that devotion to nature is so important. So there it is, that third dimension. Really, like, how we're here. So what is the spirit of it? Where's the magic in it? So
yes. And again, as a chaos magician, I see magic in everything. It's about, again, it's not about like doing something on a particular moon phase or having the right herbs to burn. It is the ritual intention behind the action, and ritual action, right? Intentional action. I put out that bird feeder, like I fill it with seeds. I keep refilling it, you know, I'm probably going to get another one. Like,
yes.
And that, like, I'm saying to the universe, like, I want this in my life. I am inviting this in. And there is something that I need that is even greater than what the gesture is, right? But the gesture creates that spiritual experience.
I love it. I want this. It makes me want to say that for anybody that needs it, to just ask the universe, or just say, I want to bring pleasure into my life. I'm ready to have, you know, fulfilling pleasure.
Yes. Yeah.
Very Lilithy, Lilithian.
Incredible. Exactly.
Or I am worthy of pleasure.
Yes. Well, and that too, it's like trauma is something that takes us all, again, also out of our bodies and alienates us from pleasure. So it is so, again, liberating, empowering to figure out what is real, what is authentic, what is truly mine, and then inviting it, asking for it, believing that you are worthy of it, asking it, and then bringing it into your life. Yeah. That also,
that's magic. That's magic, saying I'm worthy of something. Yes. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's a good affirmation.
It is, exactly.
Counteract those, you know, those Yeah. Those challenging thoughts, the ones that bring self-doubt in. Just be like, yeah, what am I worthy of? I'm worthy of feeling good. I'm worthy of pleasure. I'm worthy of enjoying the present moment.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm
Worthy of all the birds outside.
all the birds. Exactly.
And they're worthy of the seed that I'm putting out for them.
That's exactly it. Yes. So before I let you go, is there anything that you want to promote for the listening audience?
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, there is the book A Curious Future. You can get it through all major book retailers. Exciting news. I just handed it was delayed just because of life and everything. But I did send in the draft for my tarot book. So I would say be on the lookout late summer, maybe early fall.
Yes.
And I'll be talking about a tarot book a little bit more at that point too.
Oh my God, amazing.
But yeah, otherwise that's that.
Okay, cool.
I was so grateful to be here and so honored that you would, invite me to be a guest and that we could just have like a really engaging conversation about fascinating and very, very relevant things that I think we're all going through.
That's exactly
in this third dimension.
Right. The flesh calls, imprisons us. We got to deal with it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening and or watching, depending on where you found this podcast. You can find Kiki at kikidombrowski.com. I'm also going to put a link to her Twitter. You can follow her there. I'm super excited for her new book that's going to be coming out. Probably going to have her on again so I can chat with her more about the tarot. Because like I said, that conversation about the devil just really just blew my mind. I have a totally different perspective now when I do readings. You can find Personal Pans at Personal Pans on Instagram and on Twitter. And you can find me at Kali Butterfly. That's Kali Butterfly. I'm on Twitter way too much. Kiki and I recorded this episode back in April, but it seems extra relevant now considering everything going on politically. Something that Kiki said that really struck me and has stayed with me is the power in the magic of believing that you are worthy. And we were talking about believing that you are worthy of pleasure, but I think that there is an even broader power in believing that you are worthy of rights, of bodily autonomy, that you are worthy of choice. Because all those things are being attacked right now for a huge chunk of the population. And obviously, I want you to have a playful and curious day. I think play and curiosity are incredibly powerful. But I also want you to believe that you are worthy of safety and security, despite any of the political machinations currently looking to erode your humanity. You are worthy. You are worth fighting for. You are worth living for. And I hope you find the power to work to change the world rooted in that sense of worthiness.